Five. Yes, back to working on this Bushido's illustrations character. um, once again, I am Eben Matthews, co-founder of Macroverse. And you would have seen, if you saw it already, or you could go back and watch the first part of this illustration. So this is based on character from the Bushido's collection, which we love and is one of the worlds that we're building inside of the Macroverse. And this particular Bushido was staked in our Discord by the owner of this Bushido. And one of the things that we do from time to time is pick characters that have been, quote unquote, staked, kind of made available for collaboration in our Discord. And myself, and ultimately, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, some other creatives will come in and collaborate with the owners on these characters. So once this illustration is done, it will be a one-of-one piece of art. We'll mint it. We'll deliver it back to the original owner of the character. And then we'll do some fun things with that on the Macroverse platform as that develops over time, as well as just being a cool way to recognize and reward participation in our larger ecosystem. So the Bushidos is one of the worlds that we're building. There's a bunch of them. You can learn more about that at macroverse.com. You can see all of the different comic series and things that we're making on the content side of things, both in the Discord as well as on our mobile app, which is on iOS and Android. Just look for Macroverse. And a whole Bushido series is in the works as well. So we've done a whole anthology series based on characters from the community. And we're also working on a full comic series with an incredible artist named Nicholas Costell, who is crushing it. And we like to post sneak peeks from that stuff in the Discord also. So if you like any of the stuff that you're seeing, I guess my point is, come join us in the Macroverse Discord. It's a good time and a great group of people. And speaking of a great group of people, I see Lady Valor here in the comments, one of our greenlit writers and our creators in the Discord as well. So hello. So I think the last couple of these I did a Nuclear Nerd. I didn't stream the process, but you saw a Moonbird piece I did a little while ago. I've actually got another Moonbird piece I'm working on. Shout out Dave Toronto. This is my first time actually drawing a Bushido, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while. This guy has this cool gas mask, and just to kind of step back for a moment, if you missed the first part, basically this is the original illustration by Jeremy Booth. He has this incredible kind of flat graphic vector style and is doing some very cool things in his own right with a new project called the Western Art Department, which is bringing a lot of classical Western artists into the Web3 world, which is very, very cool. But love his style and fun. It's fun for me to translate that and kind of figure out how to translate that into a little more dimensional, character here. So what I started to say, hello, Rommel. What I had started to say is that, in previous streams, I think I've mostly worked on kind of drawing and line work. This is kind of the first time that I'll be more on the color finishing part of this. One of the things that I've fallen in love with, and I kind of give Into the Spider-Verse a lot of credit for this, is starting to, kind of explore and play with a lot of texture in my finishing style over the last few years. And, credit where credit's due. This is a collection of brushes and textures that come from a company called True Grit Texture Supply. I like a lot of their stuff. I think Tiny Universe, another member of our community who's just showing up now, was asking about, these kind of dot patterns and things. So these are actual brushes that come from True Grit Texture Supply. And they come in these different packs. And so you can see here, there's, this is one of the ones that I've purchased from them, which has all these different dot patterns at different levels of intensity, all these different, kind of vertical line patterns and things like that. So you can really do some interesting things with it. What I've tried to do is use them in a slightly different way than you see in most of the examples that they have on their website, where generally people use these to create sort of a vintage comic feel, like the classic printing dots from the early days of newsprint comics. I like to kind of overlap them and use them as kind of a way of creating texture without making the texture as obvious as it might be if you're looking at a close-up of an old comic panel. So I use them a little bit differently, and it's the overlap of the different dots and textures that I find pretty interesting. So it still gets a little bit of a nod or an homage to that kind of classic comic, feel, which is, again, sort of mentioning Into the Spider-Verse. One of the things I love about the style of that movie is they brought in things like dots and lines and things that kind of bring a little bit of that vibe to it, but it still feels very modern and fresh. And that's a little more of what I'm looking for with this stuff and kind of the way I approach this as well. So Tiny and Rommel, how are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Good. So I've done this kind of first pass on some beginning of shading here. And
good to see you, man. I didn't want to cut in. I'm glad you actually jumped to that first. I've been super curious about that.
Hand drawn, Tiny. Every dot.
Well, no, I knew that wasn't the case, but I've been I don't know. I guess I kind of mentioned before in Discord that even with Procreate, being so new to everything. I was talking to my wife about this the other day, like how I still kind of just use it as like a digital pencil and paper. Like I use the same pencil. I'll maybe just change like the size or darkness, that kind of stuff. But I really haven't I just started really using a whole bunch of different layers. Like at first I was, just drawing and erasing. It was literally like paper. So
yeah.
I didn't know if that was pre-installed kind of stuff, or you know what I mean? Like I haven't even experimented. I do know in Procreate there's a lot of different brushes that do some funky stuff, but that's like a super cool effect that I love, and I see it on a ton of stuff that you have done. So it's almost like, for me, it's like almost like a signature for you now. Like I see it and I'm like, oh, that's Evan.
I think it kind of is. Like I could certainly be wrong, but I haven't come across anybody else who's using it quite the way that I am. Like it's not just a light and shadow or a kind of a way of delineating that sort of classic printing technique, but it's like I'm really trying to use it as its own kind of rendering style, almost the way that I would if it didn't have the texture in it. But I like what it adds for that. And then the other thing I'm doing here is using a lot of blending modes to create sort of overlap in these different patterns. So one thing that was, I remember very distinctly in art school learning about, when you're learning color theory, one of the things that's a little eye-opening is that, so many things are just somewhat simply around complementary colors. And if anyone doesn't know what complementary colors are, you can think that the primary colors in general are red, blue, and yellow. And the reason that they're primary colors is that they can't be made by mixing any other colors together. So there's nothing that you can combine to create red or blue or yellow. Those are our primary colors. But every other color is some combination of those mixed together. So secondary colors, purple is red and blue, and green is blue and yellow, and orange is red and yellow. So you get primary colors mixed together make secondary colors, and then tertiary colors are the secondary colors plus a primary color. So you might have purple and red to get sort of a reddish purple, for there's probably a better name for that. But so that kind of formula. So even when I'm doing something like this, like I'm drawing in these or rendering these shadows, if I take this off of color burn, you can see these are all starting as shades of green. And I'm doing that because I want the shadows to have a little more of a relationship to the color in the background. And so even though they're being transformed into something darker by using this blending mode, it still has just a little bit of a relationship to the color in the background, which is a little different than if it was just black and white or an actual shade of gray. And when you come into something like the red, you actually get a little more of a reaction by using something that has a little green in it than if it was just, again, sort of a darker color or something more monochromatic. Good old color theory. And so conversely, when we get to doing lights, so like, this is more kind of focused on shadow right now, but when we get to putting some light in here, then I'll actually be using sort of a yellow red base for that, so that it pulls out those two complementary colors, red and green. Complementary colors are, you have one primary color, the other two that are left over, if you mix those together, that's the complement. So if you have red, the complement to red is green, because that's blue and yellow mixed together, which are the other two primaries left over. So a simple color theory, which almost always works, is a primary color versus a secondary color. There's an electric reaction. And so like the red against the green pops so much because of that relationship.
What if you're colorblind?
What's that?
What if you're colorblind and you don't know what red and green are?
So
it's actually kind of.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's actually kind of interesting. Historically, colors that we see today, they didn't necessarily see back in the day.
Very
like
true.
Blues and reds. So that's why a lot of their images or imagery, they talk about browns. Well, they actually meant red. They didn't have a word for it. So
that is very true.
And yes, there are colors we still can't see.
There are lots of colors we still can't see. Other animals have much higher levels of color perception than we do. So once again, you can see me kind of experimenting with what this kind of level of darkness is going to be before committing to what it's going to be, what I'm using. All right, that's more like it.
I think it's kind of interesting when you think about it, because if you fast forward 50 years from now and everyone's using AR headsets to paint stuff, will we have images that are painted that we can see with our visual eye, and then ones that we can see with our digital eye? Like, will it just be different? Will it be layered paintings?
That's a very interesting question.
Sounds like art's going to be a difficult career field.
Well, it's certainly going to be a new one, that's for sure, or an evolved one. Yeah. I mean, I think I may have talked about this before, but I've been talking to multiple of the artists that are in our kind of collective of artists or collaborators, and some are pretty freaked out, understandably, by all of what's happening with AI tools right now. And I think the biggest thing that I feel like is important to say to people, which some people don't really want to hear, but I think has to be kind of thought about or at least considered, is that the tools are going to replace a lot of what I think of initially as like production jobs, like the people that even do what I'm doing right now. Like, this may not be necessary a year from now. I may just be able to say, take this line work and give it this style based on an image that I uploaded as reference, and I might be happy with that. but the ability to conceive of what that is, what that look should be, that's the thing that I think is going to be a much longer time before that skill set is replaced in the same way. So I think it's important for creative people, whether it's writing or art or anything else, to really kind of take this opportunity to give themselves both permission and almost like I was going to say an upgrade, but more of a promotion, let's say, where if you're you gotta kind of be self-aware enough to maybe recognize this, but if you're a mid-tier production artist who is maybe talented but not at the highest level, or then I think now's a great time to start to figure out how to give yourself that bump to art director, because your draftsman, your drafts person skill set may be less necessary or less desired, or perhaps to put it very bluntly, somewhat useless in relatively short order. But your ability to think and to conceive of what the end result should be will probably never be in higher demand, at least for the immediate short term.
Yeah, I think learning how to prompt is a huge step. Whether you're an artist or a writer, like any kind of creative, you should probably be learning how to use the AI tools in some way to enhance your already available skill set.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, whether we're talking about Web3 stuff or we're talking about AI, it's like, what I have a hard time wrapping my head around for creatives in general is the fear of these things, as opposed to the opportunity to kind of get in there and start to learn how to make them a part of what you do. Because I think, you can't really decide if you're going to embrace it or rail against it until you try it. So, I think the blind unwillingness to experiment is kind of antithetical to being a creative person in my mind.
I just look at it like, if you roll the clock back to 92, the only art program you really had was Microsoft Paint. So you really didn't have to compete with Photoshop. But if someone didn't evolve to using Photoshop, I don't know how they're still in business.
Yeah. Well, and this is obviously, I don't think quite the same, but I remember when Photoshop came out, and I remember that there was an outcry that Photoshop was going to replace everyone all at once. So it's it's somewhat hard to know like how drastic that's going to be. But I think what is clear is that again, it's the person side of things. It's the people that are doing in betweens the animation. It's the in relatively short order, it's the riggers and modelers for 3D assets. Like that stuff, I have no doubt is going to become something that AI tools do very, very well and much quicker than their human counterparts. And so I think those arenas are ones where it's time to not necessarily look for a new career, but to find a different place to be valuable. That's my 2 cents.
Speaking of writing, have you seen all the talk about the writer's strike and how AI could end up affecting the conversation with the negotiations?
I've seen some of that, but what specifically are you talking about?
I've seen where some of the Writers Guild, the words they want to include in the agreement basically stop the use of AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen where apparently some of the people on the other side see that as a sticking point they don't want to adhere to. So that makes you question what are they thinking?
Yes, it's interesting. I think the definitely understandable wanting to stop the use of it. I think what's going to be very interesting, kind of along those same lines, is like we've talked about in the context of some of the stuff that we've been doing. Of it's like you can get pretty decent stuff out of ChatGPT for sure. I've said a couple of times, like for my own personal use, I almost take it as a what not to do as much as a what to do. And I'm working on stuff. But I think where the writers are right to be concerned is that studios have never been particularly good at being purely creative, let's say.
Not at all.
And so, the notion that, some amount of content could just be essentially generated in an industry where derivative material is already very much a part of the game. And in fact, in some cases, over original stuff more and more so these days. I think that is a world where there's probably a right to be concerned about that for writers in general. And it's still the same thing. Like there's a certain amount of inevitability where, the people that will be most affected again are probably on some level production. I've been listening to, I recommended it before, but there's a podcast that I absolutely love called Script Notes, which is very craft heavy around writing, but it's fantastic. And the latest episode is actually a re-broadcast of a conversation with the hosts and Ralph McQuarrie, because he's the concept artist. What is his name? Director of a couple Mission Impossible movies. McQuarrie is his last name. I'm blanking on his first name. But incredible writer, incredible pedigree. And one of the things that he talks about is that, he had wanted to start directing, and it wasn't until he gave up pursuing directing directly that he actually was able to kind of move into the director's chair in the way that he wanted it to. It kind of happened by figuring out how to be of service to the project he was on, as opposed to trying to write stuff that he would then specifically be attached to direct. But he was also talking to for writers that want to have more control over their material, or that just want to have more to say about, especially this kind of new age of content creation, that it's really the writer producer, and in the broad sense, just being someone that understands how things are made, and what component pieces of that are and how they fit together to make the final product, that those are the people that will thrive. And I think that doesn't change no matter what the tools are. All right, I feel like there's more to do on the shadow side of this, but I'm going to flip to the light side of this, from the dark side of the force to the light side of the force.
I feel like if greedy execs for any company could click a button and replace actual people, they would.
Pretty much. Yeah. Also, there's a certain number of execs that wanted to be creatives, and so what better way than to have a robot helper? But I will say, in general, I think that the writers are well. I think most of what they're asking for is well deserved and been put off for too long. Like the last writer's strike, they really gave in on a lot of points based on the studio saying, like, we don't know what any of this is going to be. And so now we know what it is. It's time to balance the scales a little bit.
The last writer's strike feels like it was so long ago.
It was, yeah. All right, so let's see. So sometimes I will start out with something like this where this orange may not work at all, but I still want to like pull that color into it. And then we may end up adjusting it entirely. But we'll start with just kind of getting in what will be one of the lightest parts of this. If we've got our light source kind of upper left, then this is going to be kind of the thing that's being hit by it the most. So this is where I just play with blending modes until I see if it actually works or not, or if it's too much. Actually, something in here probably is going to work, and then I'll just drop the opacity a little bit. And that feels pretty good. But however, when we go onto there, not so much. So that is probably just going to be for that green part. Make a new layer. And try again. This might be too intense.
So how are the new the new digs?
New digs are good. I'm looking out the window, if you can see the other side, but I am still surrounded by boxes as well. So there is that. But the new digs are good. And I don't know if you can hear my kid in the background, but yeah, we can walk to school now, which is awfully nice. So it's very nice being able to get up and do that. Thermometer is on your dresser. One of them has a fever at the moment as well, which is unfortunate.
It's that time of year.
It is that time of year, yes. Yeah, so this just may not work once we put it on here because I don't want this to actually be light cast by a color at this point. I just want it to work as light. So this, I think, orange is not going to work on the actual darkest parts of the helmet just yet. So that becomes a good reason to go up and edit and do some, let's see, is it an edit? This is where like my life as a everyday illustrator, I would know this, and now I don't. I'm looking for, oh, it's probably on layer. Yes. Going for, oh, maybe not. This is the fun part of the live stream, watching me look at menus.
We need to get Kevin Easton on and have him do a Ninja Turtles Bushido's crossover.
Oh, there we go. There's a little shredder in this guy, isn't there? A little bit. What am I not seeing here? It's not file, edit. It's probably in a submenu. Oh yeah, there we go. Tonal correction. So here's where we're going to adjust the hue, which will change the color until we find what is going to look a bit more like what we want as light. Might be too saturated as well. So probably something a bit more in this range, and then dropping the opacity. But now to find out what color that is, I want to eyedropper it, and then we can go back to here. Something more around there. All right. Have you guys seen the Mario movie?
I have not. I've heard good things though.
I was shocked by how much I loved it. Truly, truly loved it.
Yeah, I'm trying to put one of my little ones down, but I told you my wife went one day while they were out of school, and I didn't get to go. I was working, so I heard it was super fun. But
Yeah.
soon,
No, it's like 100% for those of us that grew up in that kind of N60, not N64 even, really SNES and even NES era. But yeah, super, super fun. Really, really, really fun. Makes me look forward to more Nintendo movies for sure.
Maybe it won't take 30 years to get another one.
Well, hopefully, I think this may make them less afraid to make another one than the Bob Hoskins Mario movie.
Although I did enjoy that one.
You were one of the two. Picking out little highlights is one of the things that can make something feel all of a sudden much more three-dimensional than it did a moment ago. Okay, starting to be a mask.
So you got any big plans for May?
Big plans for May? Yes. Yes, actually, I was going to kind of tease that starting around middle of the month, we've got some announcements to share. Some things that we've been putting together for a little while, which I think one of those things you in particular might be kind of excited about.
I have guesses.
Indeed. Yes, lots of fun coming.
I also have, I've been working on stuff, and I got all kinds of things complete. So, that having things complete is always good.
It is very good.
My plan for May is to start working on some of these this list of random ideas I have. So
Excellent. What is top among those if you have something you can share?
let me take a look.
Lady Valor said it better be the mouse.
Better be what?
She said it better be the mouse.
Yes. I concur.
The mouse is it's one, maybe two. I got a couple of AI stories I want to knock out before the AI craze gets too bad. But I came up with a couple of AI concepts. The one I think I told you about, where it's I'm going to write the human side and have the AI write the AI side of a war. So that one's cool.
Very cool.
And I have a story I started just so I'd have it written down, but it's about a doctor who discovers the secret to immortality using AI systems. He's figured it out, right? He's figured out the immortality secret, but turns out there's already immortals on the planet, and they don't want him to release it. So the story is as to why a group of immortals would try to stop humans from achieving immortality.
I like that. Very cool.
That one will be much shorter, which means plenty of time for the mouse.
More mouse. All right, now objectively, what do we feel is missing with this Bushido here?
Texture for the flames?
Definitely for the flames. And I've decided to make those flames actual flames, so that'll be one of the kind of last things I do, but there'll be some light getting thrown by that as well when we get there. But yes, definitely texture for the flames. Now, one thing, so this is Clip Studio, which I love as a drawing program. But one of the things that I haven't yet figured out is why these textures, which I have no problem with in Procreate, why in Clip Studio do they seem to change size from image to image, which necessitates this kind of laborious process here where I need to adjust them to get them to the right size. Let's see. It's that. So I think it's up here again. Edit. Again, the fun part of watching this. If you want to go watch some paint dry for a minute, feel free. As I remember where this setting is. Let's see. Transform. New.
I don't do a lot of digital art anymore. Lately, it's
Mhm.
just been like remixes and edits with PixArt on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's sometimes where you're like, where is this button?
Yeah.
I used it yesterday.
Exactly. Exactly. Subtool details. There we go. I think. So this is shape. New size. No, not brush size. Oh my goodness, where did it go? Shape, tip. Yeah, it's definitely in here somewhere. Let's see. Is it density? I don't think so. Nope. So what I want it to do is be closer together with the lines. Thickness. Nope. Oh, texture. Duh. Scale ratio. That's what I'm looking for. Yep. So yeah, 40 is probably good. Or 50. There we go. Okay. So that will be more of what I want for now, kind of a harder light source. Actually, maybe we'll just tinge this ever so slightly green as well to keep it in the same world. Let's try this.
So I started reading a series, a book called He Who Fights with Monsters.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lit RPG.
Nice.
It's pretty good. I read 9 books. So far, I love the world. I love the characters. The writing, it's got some points where like it could be better, could have been cleaned up a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, it's fantastic. It's still working its way through. It's looking like it's going to be like an 18 book series.
Wow.
But the author puts out 2 to 3 books a year.
That's awesome. Have you read something else by this author, or is this kind of a first entree?
This is his first piece.
Nice.
So it's interesting watching it unfold, and I'm like, huh, would you be interested in making a comic book?
Mm-hmm. I like it.
Like they said, always be selling.
Yes, indeed. There's an ice cream truck going by outside.
When I was younger, I'd go visit my grandma, and an ice cream truck would come by every Saturday, and one of her neighbors was an old guy. He would sprint out to the ice cream truck to pay for all the kids' ice cream.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Seems like a good metaphor for life. You know, should all be so lucky to have someone pay for our ice cream occasionally. Yeah.
100%.
Actually, that wouldn't be getting hit there.
Clark's World recently published their most recent anthology, and they had to pull it because it turns out the artists for their cover art used AI and didn't tell them.
Tricky. I have been. I don't know. I don't know if yeah, I don't know quite what the right word is for the. I've been watching with interest, I guess, is a way to say it. Where it's been, you know, a number of contests won and yeah, things that have been AI generated only to be kind of revealed after the fact. It's kind of interesting.
Which is interesting to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've used it quite a bit, and usually you can look at it and tell it's AI. Like,
yeah, I think so too. But clearly, that is becoming harder to discern.
I'm also curious to see how NFTs expand from this point.
Any theories?
I got a couple theories.
Okay.
I think the rest of this year is kind of a wash. You still got too many people chasing dollars, not chasing tech or chasing collectibles. But I think on the other side of that, going out to next year, you have, as the collectors start to arrive, some of the early NFTs are going to be worth a lot of money. But a lot of the growing projects, like the Macroverse comics, possibly Macroverse books at some point, as those things start to hit, heading into the rest of this year, into next year, and so forth, you'll see more people buying those and putting them in soul-bound wallets and that kind of stuff, just because they want to keep them and collect them.
No, more live. Wave.
Hello.
Am I letting him stay at 101.5
Yeah,
as long as he doesn't go up?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Fever consult.
It is kind of funny because, you know, kid gets us to 100, they want to run around. We get to 100 and we just want to lay on the couch and not move.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, I don't know, for better or worse, I'm in the wait as long as you can before giving or taking medicine camp. But like generally, your body will fight most things off, and then if you need it, you take it. But
We are lucky to live in a time where we can just make it happen as needed.
yeah, absolutely.
It's staggering to think how many people died over the centuries because they didn't have Tylenol.
Oh yeah. No, we are definitely living in a age of wonders when it comes to things like that. This is what I like about this texture thing so much, is that like when you go in close on it, it's all this kind of interesting overlapping stuff. But when you go smaller, it just all comes together into this pretty cool rendered thing.
Kind of looks like a macronaut.
Kind of could be a macronaut. Yeah, some progress on that front, which I will have to report pretty soon as well.
That is actually on my list to work on this week.
Excellent. Definitely glad to hear that.
Has there been any word on Jeremy doing some more Ronin or Bushido's work?
That's a good question. I don't want to get people's hopes falsely up. So he's not doing any new Bushido's or Ronin work at the moment, but I think we could say that there might be some Bushido's or Ronin work which hasn't necessarily been revealed just yet. I think that's safe to say.
I feel like he should do a Ronin versus Cowboy. Just one.
I mean, in my desire, I agree with that as well. But I also completely get and respect. Like, I think the game that he is playing, and I mean that in the best possible way, is very smart and very considered at the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Building our career the way that he is right now, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to really focus on this, kind of Western niche that he's created. And the cool thing is, like, I think the East meets West, connection is always going to be an interesting one. And when we do get him back for something new, let alone anything that perhaps hasn't been seen yet, that will be a moment. What I don't love is a project that happened recently that absolutely blatantly took his style.
I saw that. I initially thought it was his, and then I looked
Exactly.
closer.
And I think that's the problem, is many people thought that it was his. And he even said, and I think rightly so, it's not even so much objecting to the style as the kind of leaning into having people think that it was his. Because all projects that are going to be around for the long term pretend that they're by someone that they aren't.
Currently checking the market for some more Vogu and hoping someone puts some GSA armor up close to the floor for me.
Is that a challenge for Tiny?
Always.
Although I feel like he's probably reciprocating that, but yes.
I think only 1 or 2 pieces go up every 3 months.
Of armor?
Yeah, it's getting hard to get.
Yeah. People are coming around to the value of what armor actually is.
I think there's there's 93, but I think 13 got sent to burn wallets.
Hmm.
And then I have like 15.
Nice. Are you the biggest holder of armored GSA agents at the moment?
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I would have been shocked if that were done.
I am the army.
Yes.
But NFTs definitely remind me of collectible cards and comic books from the early 90s.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think I put a thread up about that a little bit, where it's just like this feels exactly like the speculator boom and bust of the kind of post era to me. Yeah.
It's like if you look back, some of those comics were so overproduced at the time, they were worth nothing.
Oh yeah. Quarter bin it, 2 years later for sure. And now some of them are legitimately worth a good amount. So that's both sides of that equation, I think.
I'm still
Finally
surprised.
back. Sorry, guys.
Oh,
And yes, it is a challenge. I will take all the armor that I see anywhere near your floor. Unfortunately, I'm only up to 2. But my, I feel like the most sought after thing, and it's funny because I'm I guess good friends with Children of Akio, but one of the big things they said, Bennett and I were on their space the other day, and they were saying how one of the big things that they do for, so obviously selecting characters for, they do color in books and some other children's books and different things, but they don't really look at rarity and stuff, even though like obviously all of the NFTs have them. Like their biggest thing that they tell their community members is like, don't purchase off rarity or traits, like purchase off what looks good to you, because generally, like when they take community votes and stuff, that's what's going to generally win the votes, is like what looks good. That's what they're going to want to put in their their coloring books, or for anyone else, like a comic or whatever. And that's kind of like how I feel with GSA. Like there's so many times where I'll go to look for a trait, but like when I open up the the marketplaces, it typically is the ones that have like no traits and they're naked, and it's just the agent, stripped down. Those are the ones where I'm like, ooh, look at this. This is awesome.
People like the clean ones.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but those are the ones that like I could see in my head, like, I don't know, being like in some kind of super funny story or something. Why is this guy got no clothes, no nothing? Dude, where's my car?
Well, you're the one to conceive that for sure.
Yeah, I don't know how I keep ending up like that.
I have not written any comedies. Maybe I should try one.
Mm-hmm. And ask ChatGPT for some punch-ups.
A lot of the stuff I write tends to go, this is great, this is fun, and we're going to go really heavy now. Yeah, there's some comics from like the early 90s that shock me when I look them up. Like, you can get a 9.8 graded Death of Superman for $180.
Yeah. Well, that's a good example of one that was massively overproduced. Yeah.
I think everyone's had plenty of copies by now.
Yes. But then the flip side of that, I think, is interesting, is like, something like, New Mutants 98, which, or not New Mutants 98, but first issue, which was also massively overproduced, and, I think 5 copies sold, I think. And because of all the different trading cards, and then because of the subsequent success of Deadpool, those Deadpool cards, with or without the comics, are worth a bunch of money, which is interesting to me. So just, again, I think, I don't know. I think one of the strange things about the NFT market to me is, people seemingly losing sight of that, feeling like there's anything new here as far as the collectible side of it goes. Like, it's just, we've just seen all of it before, just in different contexts. And so why it would be any different, other than the speed, because of the fact that it's a digital live market, is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's like I've done my fair share of flipping and trading, but a lot of the ones I own currently, I have no plans of selling them, so I don't know what the value of them is. Like,
exactly. Yeah. And it's funny, I was thinking about for myself, like, even when I was hardcore collecting comics, like I am the other side of that. Like, I've hardly ever sold anything, and I've got a pretty valuable comic collection, mostly just because it's old. And I collected all the stuff. I had some of it in the right place at the right time. But the flip side of that is like, most of it, like I get more enjoyment out of having it and knowing that it's valuable than I would out of selling it. It's like there's something for me that's intrinsically more fun about going, oh, I got this thing and I remember where I got it and now it's worth something. Like I'd rather have that mental experience than the dollars.
Absolutely. Like my Dead Town #5. He's fantastic. He is never leaving this wallet. At this point, he can be soul bound. It's fine.
That's right. Good.
But I also think that, I don't know if it's just because we're old, but people don't realize how fast time goes. And
Very true as well.
buying those comics in the 90s, like, oh yeah, they'll be worth money one day. Fast forward 30 years later, they're worth some money.
Yeah.
But that 30 years went by quick.
Very true. Yeah. That is also very true.
I know there's a lot of like NFT card games that people are trying to kick up and get going. And I think about the trading card game craze of the 90s too.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had a new trading card game every month.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think
And
I still
before-
have.
Oh, go ahead.
I said I think I still have Sim City trading
Yeah.
card game.
Yeah. And I remember when I was in middle school and high school playing Dungeons and Dragons, when D&D was still super popular, or before its subsequent re-popularity. There was a ton of role-playing games, that were coming out all the time. Some of which were awesome and some of which were not.
Some of those books are actually crazy expensive too.
Yeah.
I have a whole cabinet of RPG books from back in the day, and some of the early Star Wars ones are worth just silly amounts.
Yeah.
But like we said, I couldn't. The Star Wars ones right now, I couldn't sell those books, even if I wanted to. They have scribbles from when I was in middle school, and they still have character sheets tucked in the back, and hours and hours of memories like attached to that particular thing. I'll keep it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think our Bushido is getting there.
Looks good.
Getting there. Flames notwithstanding, still, but
The blue looks like it wants to glow.
it does. Yeah, I get that impression from the original as well. It feels like there's some glow. And then what I also planned on doing here in this stage is the lines in the back of his helmet. Nope. Back to that was in here as well. Oh, great. Now back to finding where I made that setting before. Let's see. Window, I think. There we go.
I am also curious to see, as we go into this next evolution of just storytelling, if we see the rebirth of fandom for different franchises, or if we continue to see a degradation of fandom, like we see with Star Wars.
You mean, well, say more about that.
It seems like if you look at Star Wars, the fervor that used to be attached to it, or the fervor that used to be attached to like Marvel, it's not there anymore. And part of that, I'm not sure if it's oversaturation or if it's just the fact that so many of the directors and people in charge have been trying to shirk like the rabbit fandom.
Like they're playing it down in some way.
Yeah, like they're looking at the group of people that are rabbit fans and going, okay, that's cool, but we're going to try to expand it as much to every other demographic and not that one.
So less fan service, basically.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of that with Star Wars.
Although it's interesting because to me, like Andor is my favorite Star Wars thing that they've done in quite a while, and it felt the least fan servicey to me, which is also the flack that it got from a lot of people is not Star Wars enough. But I thought that was like to me, I think that what I'm tired of personally is just kind of stagnation of it's like trying to lean too much into what it was instead of letting it
what it should be
go in different directions. Like we've got to me that's what's so interesting about the things that have worked. It's what made the first decade of Marvel I think so successful is that they did lean into different genres, different styles, different approaches to different movies. So it wasn't just like another superhero movie. It's like oh, this one is a spy thriller, this one is a comedy, this one is a sci-fi movie. Like letting those things be intertwined with heroes to me just made it way more interesting, and it was a big part of why the first phases, especially through Infinity Gauntlet, were so successful. And I feel like it's a little bit why they've, in my mind, floundered a little bit. Is they haven't had the same ability to kind of reinvent the genre or reinvent the approach. It's feeling a little bit like us before, which was kind of why I think we got tired of previous incarnations of some of these things. So I don't know. I think it's a challenge to me is like, how do you keep it fresh? Like I have no problem with them broadening the demographic as long as it's still interesting.
Right. I think like the problem Marvel has had, at least to me, is Guardians of the Galaxy. And I say that because as awesome as the first one was, they took the setup from Guardians and applied it to every single Marvel movie after. So every Marvel movie is just a version of Guardians. That's why you get the same quips, the same comedy, the same over the topness, as opposed to pre-Guardians where it was like, you had this kind of Marvel movie, you had that kind of Marvel movie. Even the TV series like Loki and all that, they're really just small versions of Guardians. So I think that's why they're stagnating for sure.
I can see that. Yeah.
And with Star Wars, Andor, I think actually was like one of the most Star Wars stories.
Well, yeah, I agree. But I think the flack it took was for not being, for being serious, for being, not trying to connect things back to the other films and as much kind of fan service. Whereas as much as I enjoy The Mandalorian, it's like they're definitely leaning way into the playing the hits.
And like The Mandalorian, the first season was awesome.
Yeah,
And then
totally.
after that, the fan service kind of took over, I think,
Yeah.
and became too much.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
I think
to me, that first season was so awesome because it was completely disconnected from the rest of everything.
like the Star Wars universe, and I think if you have a franchise that's worth telling stories in, you're going to have stories that don't involve the main characters or even the main plot line.
Exactly.
And Star Wars is so deep that you could tell stories that don't need Jedi. They don't need the Force.
Yeah.
But and I think this is where you see their fans kind of cooling off is you have to still give them those bones. So Luke Skywalker is probably the most prevalent character in the history of Star Wars. So like if you're going to make a show that takes place during a time where you could have Luke Skywalker, you might want him to appear at some point or just give him his own TV series. But you shouldn't go, I'm not going to talk about him because I don't want that character anymore. That's a bad move.
Agreed. Well, and I loved it when Luke showed up at the end of season 2. Was it end of season 2? Or was that end of season 1? Yeah. I don't remember now. But like that was a great moment. And then we didn't necessarily need to spend a random episode with him and Grogu. I don't know.
Exactly. Like he showed up, he saved the day, and we got our cool Luke Skywalker moment. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like in Rogue One when Darth Vader showed up.
Yeah, exactly. Now that was a intentional and great kind of counterpoint.
Like it that scene alone was worth watching the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But you didn't need him for the rest of the movie. So like I just feel like the people that are in charge over there are trying to copy Marvel into Star Wars, and they're losing fans.
I agree with that. I don't know if you've been watching Better Call Saul, but just getting to the final episodes, which is pretty exciting.
I have not watched. I watched I think like the first season, and then I decided I was going to wait till it completely finished, and I binged the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, your time is now. It is now fully bingeable.
I'm not a big fan of watching things live anymore. Ironically, because of the last writer strike.
Yeah.
There was so much like TV that season that got cut to half a season, or storylines completely forgotten about. Like
Yeah.
if you were watching a show at that time, you can almost guarantee it didn't end in a way it was worth your time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. There are some things I still like. There's tends to be kind of like one or two things that I'm actually watching in real time, and then pretty much everything else is later. Like I think right now the only thing is Succession that actually looking forward to, like, or wanting to watch it like as soon as it comes out. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna kind of call this here for the moment. I would say 80-ish% done with Bushido here. So what's left is the flames, the background, a bit more of the background, just a little bit more shading probably in this area for the most part. It's a little flat comparatively. And then I think we're pretty close to done. Maybe a couple of other little effects, but feeling pretty good about them. Cool. So I think my wrap up here will be more to come, as always. If you have enjoyed this and you want to take a chance to perhaps have this treatment for your own characters, once again, bring them to the Macroverse Discord, discord.gg/Macroverse. We've got a whole channel where you post your characters, any ideas around who they are, where they come from. Of course, if they're related to Macroverse, we love that, but it's not required. I'll continue to do this. We've got some other artists that are going to jump in and continue to do some of this as well. And also, we will continue to make short stories around them in comic form. So that's the other thing that can happen with the characters that get staked in those channels. We will be resuming Macronaut-specific material over the next few weeks as well, back into the audio series. And while it may not be necessarily obvious in some of these live streams, a lot of what I'm doing in making these illustrations of these characters is also thinking about how the final Macronauts character is going to look. So it will make sense when you start to see them. There was and is an Easter egg for what that process is going to look like in the Moonbirds Macronaut piece I did as well. So anyone that missed that's interested in what is going to be happening in Macronauts land, you don't necessarily need to own it, but you will want to pay attention to that piece. Something's going to happen with that. On that note, have a wonderful evening. Rommel, thanks for hanging out. Enjoyed chatting with you as I was drawing. And we'll be back same time next week with more drawing or Macronauts or storytelling or all of the above. And in the meantime, see you in the Discord. And also, final note, the series that we've been putting out on the Macroverse app, Darkland, which we describe as Game of Thrones in Hell, is at its next to last episode. So you're 2 weeks away from being able to binge the entire season, the entire series up to this point. 13 episodes in season 1. And episode 12 came out this past Sunday, heading to quite a climactic conclusion. I will warn anyone watching that if you haven't caught up on Darkland, we are absolutely pushing the envelope of what we can get away with in that series. So when we were making it, we very much said to the artist and to and Evan, who created it and wrote it, the line here is, if they could do it on Game of Thrones, we can do it in the series. So if you ever saw Game of Thrones, you should have a sense of what that means, but we are absolutely pushing those boundaries. So just be warned as you go into it. There are some things that get a little crazy in the best possible way. But I think it's come out really well, and kudos to Frank who did the art, and Evan who wrote it, and Steven on our production team, and everybody else who put it together. Excited to have that almost out. Yeah, so wrap it up there. Rommel, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.